Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are taking your source material, all the history, the reports, the incredible research you've put together, and turning that information stack into a knowledge shortcut.
And today, we are jumping into something massive.
The Legion, the Roman Legion. I mean, where do you even start with a military unit that was operational for over 1,000 years?
Well, that's the thing, right? You start by understanding that we're not talking about a fixed entity. The Legion was, arguably the most successful fighting force in history, but its whole secret was that it never stood still.
It was constantly adapting.
Constantly. Its size, its makeup, even its job.
Yeah.
It all changed. It evolved from this small, part-time citizen levy into a permanent, professional imperial army.
And then it sort of broke down again at the end, right? Into smaller, more specialized units.
Exactly. It was a masterpiece of flexible organization, always responding to the world around it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our sources cover this whole journey from, the famous three-line formation of the Republic all the way to the insane pay scales for a top centurion and the brutal discipline that kept it all together.
Right.
So the mission for you, our listener, is to move past that textbook image of just a guy with a gladius and a shield and to really understand the organizational genius, the military machine that made all that conquest possible for centuries.
And just to set the scope, think about this. The basic definition is simple. A legion is made up of Roman citizens, legionaries.
Okay.
But the numbers are all over the place. In the Republic, you might be looking at 4,200 infantry and maybe 300 cavalry.
Pretty specific.
Then in the early imperial period, it standardizes to around 5,500 men. But by the 4th century AD, that same name, legio, could mean a unit of just 1,000, maybe 1,500 guys.
Wow. So the name stays, but the thing itself is completely different.
Fundamentally reshaped. Always. That's the key.
That flexibility, that willingness to just tear up the playbook and redesign your core unit, that might be the secret ingredient right there. So let's start at the beginning. Where did this all come from?
We have to go way back. Roman Kingdom era, before the Republic is even really a thing. Our sources suggest that back then, the word legiti might have just meant the entire Roman army, the whole lot.
So it wasn't a unit, it was everybody.
Pretty much. And their way of fighting was heavily influenced by their neighbors, the Etruscans, but also the big military idea of the time was the Greek and Macedonian phalanx.
That big block of spears.
Right. But the legion we really think of, its identity is totally different in the early and mid-Republic. This was not a professional army.
Right. This is a key point.
A huge point. From about 509 BC until the big reforms around 107 BC, the legion was a citizen levy, pure and simple. If you owned property, you had a duty to serve.
So you're conscripted.
Only when there was a war. The second the conflict ended, the legion was disbanded. The men went right back to their farms, their shops. There was no such thing as a standing army.
That changes everything about motivation, doesn't it? I mean, you're not signing up for a 25-year career and a pension.
Not at all.
So why do it? Why leave your farm and risk your life?
The reward was short-term. It was loot, plunder. If your campaign was successful, you came home with treasure, with goods, with slaves.
Which for a property owner would be a massive boost to your wealth and your status?
A huge boost. It's a very transactional system. It worked great for short local wars, but as Rome's ambitions got bigger, it started to fall apart.
And the military system for that kind of local warfare was the famous manipular system. When did that come about?
That really gets going after a huge defeat. The Gauls sack Rome around 387 BC, and the Romans realized that their rigid phalanx just didn't work in the hill terrain of Italy.
They needed to be more flexible.
Exactly. So they developed this new system. The definitive version, the one that the historian Polybius wrote about, was a huge shift.
And how did that work?
The key was organizing by age and experience, not just social class. And they changed the gear. They dropped the long spears for the front two lines and adopted the gladius, that short stabbing sword, and two heavy javelins called pila.
For that devastating opening volley.
You got it.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was set up in 3 distinct lines of heavy infantry.
Okay, let's break those down because this is the core of the Republic's army. First up, the hastati.
The hastati. These are your rookies, the youngest, least experienced guys, and they put them right at the front.
Which sounds kind of brutal.
It's brutally pragmatic. It's where they get experience. And if they break and run, well, you've still got your 2 best lines behind them ready to go.
So the front line is basically a training ground that also soaks up the first attack. What's behind them?
Behind them, you have the principes. These are the guys in their prime. More experienced, better equipped, they are the main battle line.
So if the Hastati fall back,
They retreat through gaps left in the Principes line, who then step forward and hit an enemy that's already tired and disorganized from the first fight.
a brilliant system of staggered force. And then the legendary last line, the guys who gave us an idiom, the Triari.
The Triari, these are the veterans, the oldest, most experienced soldiers in the army, the elite corps. And they were used only when things were absolutely desperate.
And they thought differently, right?
They did. They were the one line that kept the long spears, the haste, and they fought in a dense phalanx. Can you imagine the psychological shock for an enemy? You think you've broken 2 Roman lines, you're exhausted, and then this fresh, impenetrable wall of spear points and heavy armor stands up and starts moving towards you.
And that's where you get the phrase, ad triarios ridis, to fall back on the Triari.
Meaning you're playing your last card, you're using your final, most trusted resort. It's amazing how a military tactic becomes part of the language.
It really is. But this whole system, it depended on having enough citizens who owned property. As Rome expanded, that started to become a problem.
A massive problem. Which brings us to the next great transformation. The late Republic, around 100 BC, and the reforms of Gaius Marius. This is the birth of the professional army.
This is where everything changes.
Everything. The property requirement was completely dropped. The army became a voluntary professional career path.
And with that professionalism, you get standardization. So those 3 different lines, they're gone.
All gone. They were replaced by a single standard type of heavy infantryman. Everyone was equipped and trained the same way, like the old Principes. Everyone gets a gladius, pala, a helmet, chainmail armor, and that big rectangular scutum shield.
Which makes training and logistics so much easier.
Infinitely easier. And tactically, they shift from the maniple to the cohort system.
Why was the cohort better for a professional army?
It was bigger, more robust. A legion was now 10 cohorts. A standard cohort was made up of 6 centuries of 80 men each.
So about 480 men.
Right. It's a much bigger tactical block to maneuver on the battlefield than the old maniples. It gave generals way more flexibility.
But the first cohort was different. It was special.
The first cohort was the elite unit. It was double strength, around 800 men. It had the best soldiers, the most prestige. It was the anchor of the whole formation.
Now, we can't talk about the Imperial Legion without talking about the other half of the army, the guys who weren't citizens, the auxiliaries.
Absolutely essential. The auxilia, these were non-citizens, the peregrini, recruited from all over the provinces. They did all the jobs the heavy infantry couldn't.
So, cavalry, archers?
Archers from Syria, heavy cavalry from Gaul and Spain, light infantry, skirmishers, you name it, they were indispensable.
And what's so fascinating is the deal they got. Service in the auxiliaries was a direct pass to becoming a Roman citizen.
It was a huge engine of Romanization. You serve your 25 years honorably, you get discharged, and boom, you and often your family are now Roman citizens.
That's an incredible way to secure loyalty from the provinces.
And just think about the scale. By the time of the Severan dynasty, sources suggest auxiliaries made up something like 55 to 60% of the total Roman army.
Wait, more than half. So the classic image of the Roman army as just legions of citizens is wrong.
It's misleading. It was a combined arms force, with the core of citizen legions supported by a massive, specialized, non-citizen auxiliary force.
And this whole shift to a professional army had, well, devastating political consequences back in the Republic.
It's the tragedy of the late Republic. When the army became a career, a soldier's loyalty was no longer to the abstract idea of the state, but to the general who promised him pay, land, and retirement benefits.
To men like Sulla, Pompey, and Julius Caesar.
Exactly. A general's legions became his political power base, which leads directly to civil war.
Caesar crossing the Rubicon with his legion. That's the point of no return.
It's a direct military challenge to the Republic's authority. And even later, under the Empire, the legions are the kingmakers. In the Year of the Four Emperors, it's the legions on the Danube and in Syria that decide Vespasian will be emperor. Their support was everything.
So when Augustus becomes the first emperor, he has to get this under control. What were his big reforms?
He brings order. He stabilizes the number of legions down to 28, and then, famously, down to 25 after a massive disaster.
The Teutoburg Forest, the Varian disaster.
The complete annihilation of 3 entire legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, by Germanic tribes. It was such a shocking, traumatic loss that those legion numbers were never used again. Augustus is said to have cried out, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions."
And besides cutting the numbers, he made service a permanent 25-year contract.
Right. And he stationed them in fixed, permanent fortresses, the Castra Legionaria, out on the frontiers, far away from the political heart of the empire. This created the stable, professional imperial army that guarded the borders for centuries.
So that 5,000-man Imperial Legion becomes the standard for a few hundred years. But then, as the empire comes under more and more pressure, that model also starts to break down.
It does. The empire was just too big, the frontiers too long for these huge, slow-moving armies. Under emperors like Diocletian and Constantine, the military has to change again.
So they break up the big legions.
They do. They get broken down into smaller, more mobile units. A legion in the 4th century might only be 1,000 or 1,500 men, and they're specialized.
Okay, so what were these new types of units?
You basically get 3 tiers. At the top, you have the elite mobile strike forces, the Legiones Palatinae, the Palace Legions, highly trained, often heavy cavalry, the Emperor's rapid response force.
Yeah, below them.
You have the main field army, the comitenses. They're the ones who respond to major invasions. Still high quality, but a step below the Palatinae.
And holding the line.
You have the Limitinae, the border guards. They were permanently stationed along the frontiers, the limes, and they became almost a kind of part-time militia, farming their own land grants. The whole strategy shifted from offense to defense.
It's just incredible how that word legi survives. But what it means is completely transformed again and again.
Adaptability.
Yeah.
Not rigidity. That was their superpower.
Now that we have the structure, let's get inside the ranks. The command structure is fascinating because it's not just a military hierarchy, it feels like a government agency.
Or an early militarized corporation. That's a great way to think about it.
So who's at the very top? Who's commanding this force of 5,000 men?
That's the legatus legionis, the legionary legate. He's a senator, a political appointee, usually there for 3 or 4 years as a stepping stone in his career.
So he's not necessarily a career soldier.
Not at all. He's a politician. And if his province only had 1 legion, he was also the provincial governor. So he held both military and civil power.
And his second in command.
That's the Tribunus Laticlavius, the broadband tribune. Another young guy of senatorial rank, even less experienced, just checking a box on his way up the political ladder.
So your top 2 commanders are political appointees. Who's the guy who actually knows how to run an army?
Ah, that's the number 3, the Praefectus Castrorum, the camp prefect. This guy is the real deal, a long-serving career veteran who has risen all the way up from the ranks.
He's the institutional memory of the Legion.
He's everything. He's in charge of training, logistics, the camp itself. He's lower in social status than the political guys, but he's the operational expert. It's a brilliant system of checks and balances.
And then you have a whole staff of other officers.
5 more tribunes, the Tribuni Angusticlavi. These are the administrators, the managers from the equestrian class. They handle the supply chains, the payroll, the endless paperwork. It's a massive bureaucratic operation.
But the real engines of the whole machine, the guys who made it work day to day, the centurions.
The absolute backbone of the army, you had about 59 or 60 of them in a legion. They ran everything. Drills, discipline, field commands, everything.
And their pay reflected that.
10 times the basic wage of a regular soldier. They were the essential middle management.
And it wasn't just one rank, was it? It was this intensely competitive career path.
Incredibly stratified. At the very top was the primus pilus, the first file, the most senior centurion in the entire legion.
And his pay was just staggering.
60 times the base legionary wage.
60. That puts him into the upper class just through his military career.
That was the point. After a year as primus pilus, he retired and was automatically granted equestrian status. It was a path to immense wealth and social mobility, rewarding pure, proven competence.
But getting there must have been incredibly difficult.
Almost impossible for most. There's this great anecdote about a centurion named Petronius Fortunatus. Our sources show he served for an unbelievable 42 years.
42 years?
In 12 different legions, a total pro. But in all that time, he never made it to the top ranks, the Prima Ordiens. It just shows how tough that climb was.
So what about the regular guy, the basic legionary, the Caligatus? What's his financial reality?
Well, his base pay started at 225 denarii a year, and it went up over time. But you have to understand, that's gross pay.
The deductions.
Exactly. Money was immediately taken out for your food, your boots, your equipment. You were definitely not taking home that full amount.
There were ways to earn more, right? For
Right.
specialized roles.
Yes, the army valued skills. You had the duplicarius, who got double pay, and the sesquiplicarius at 1.5 times pay. This was for guys like the Optio, the Centurion second in command, and the standard bearers.
And this brings us back to the militarized corporation idea. The Legion had its own bank.
It did. And the banker was the signifer, the guy who carried the century standard, the signum.
And he got double pay for that.
He did, because he was also the unit's financial administrator. He handled the payroll, the deductions, and he held the soldiers' savings in a common strongbox. He was their banker on the march.
That's an incredible level of financial sophistication for an army in the field. And what about the other specialists? The guys who weren't just fighters?
You're talking about the immunes. These were soldiers who were exempt immune from manual labor and routine guard duty because their skills were too valuable.
Like who?
Engineers, doctors, clerks, armorers, surveyors, the technical experts. This shows you how much Rome valued that specialized knowledge. They weren't going to have their best engineer digging a latrine.
It's a deliberate strategic choice. The bureaucracy, the technical skill, was just as important as the fighting.
It was essential to keeping 5,000 men functioning hundreds of miles from home.
And then, after all that, if you survived for 25 years, you got the ultimate prize.
Yeah.
The retirement package. The premia.
A huge incentive. You got a big cash payout starting at 3,000 denarii under Augustus, and often a plot of good farmland.
Which also served another
A
purpose.
huge political purpose. You settle these loyal, experienced veterans in newly conquered or unstable frontier areas, and they help to stabilize and Romanize the region. It's a retirement plan and a state-building program all in one.
Incredible. So if pay and structure provided the incentive, you still need something to hold it all together under extreme stress. And that's where symbols and discipline come in.
Absolutely. They provided the cohesion, the glue.
Let's start with the most powerful symbol of all, the aquila, the eagle.
From 104 BC on, the eagle was the sacred standard of the entire legion. It was carried by the aquilifer, who, again, got double pay for the immense honor and responsibility.
It wasn't just a flag.
Oh, no. It was the living embodiment of the legion's honor, its soul. To lose the eagle was the ultimate disgrace. A legion that lost its eagle was often disbanded in shame.
And there's that amazing story from Caesar's invasion of Britain that shows just how powerful that symbol was.
It's incredible. His troops are on the ships, and they're hesitating to land because the Britons are all waiting for them on the beach. They're scared.
And what happens?
The aquilifer of the famed 10th Legion, seeing this, just leaps into the water by himself, holding the eagle high, and starts wading towards the shore. He basically shames his comrades into following him because they could not bear the disgrace of the eagle being lost.
The fear of shame was a better weapon than a sword. What other symbols did they use?
Loyalty was constantly being reinforced. You had the imaginifer, who carried the imago, a standard with a 3D portrait of the reigning emperor on it, a constant visual reminder of who you're fighting for.
Right. And then what about when parts of the Legion were operating separately?
They'd carry a vexillum, which was a smaller banner. These detached units were called vexillationes. It allowed them to maintain their unit identity and morale even when they were hundreds of miles from the main force.
Okay, so that's the cohesion. Now let's talk about the fear, the unbelievably harsh military law. Even for minor stuff, it was severe.
It was. The most common punishment was castigatio, basically getting hit by your centurion staff.
Right.
Or you could get your pay docked or be forced to eat barley instead of wheat, which was a huge humiliation.
And for more serious things.
Flogging. And the worst personal punishment was a dishonorable discharge, the missio ignominiosa. You lose everything, your retirement, your honor, everything.
But the major punishments were on another level entirely. They were designed to create terror. Let's talk about fistuarium.
This was the death sentence for things like desertion or falling asleep on guard duty, and the execution was communal.
What do you mean?
The guilty soldier would be beaten or stoned to death by his own comrades, right in front of the entire legion. It was brutal, but it made every single soldier complicit in upholding the law.
And then there's the most infamous one of all, decimation.
The ultimate collective punishment used for mutiny or mass cowardice. The entire unit would be forced to draw lots.
Yeah.
And 1 out of every 10 men would be beaten to death by the other 9.
By their own friends.
For the men they marched and fought with. Can you imagine the psychological horror of that? It was a tool to absolutely crush any thought of group insubordination.
It's just an overwhelming system of control. So when you put it all together, the structure, the pay, the symbols, the discipline, What were the big picture reasons for their long-term success?
Well, the philosopher Montesquieu really nailed it. He said the Romans became masters of the world because they were always willing to drop their own practices when they found better ones. Adaptability, that was their genius.
We've seen that again and again.
They could take a catastrophic beating from someone like Hannibal, lose entire armies, and just raise new ones. Their administrative system and their manpower pool allowed them to absorb losses that would have destroyed any other power. Sheer bloody-minded persistence.
And they were always willing to steal the best ideas.
Always. The gladius sword from the Spanish, warship design from the Carthaginians. They had no pride about it. If it worked, it was now Roman.
And they had a technical edge, too.
A huge one. Especially in the late Republic and Empire, every legionary had high-quality, standardized armor, a helmet, a great shield. That gave them a massive advantage over most tribal opponents. And their training was relentless. They were taught to thrust with the sword, not slash. It's less tiring and far more deadly.
And finally, something we keep coming back to, their engineering.
Unmatched. The fact that a legion on the march would build a fully fortified camp, the castra, every single night in just a few hours. That's a strategic game changer. It meant they were never truly vulnerable. They carried their fortress with them, logistics, road building, siege warfare. They treated these as core military skills.
So it's that whole package: discipline, organization, adaptation, and engineering. The machine.
That's the machine, and that's our deep dive. We've seen this unit constantly redefine itself, from that citizen militia with its manipuls to the professional cohort-based army that built the empire, and then into the smaller mobile forces of the late empire.
And the longevity is just mind-boggling. You think about modern military units, but our sources confirm that one legion, Legio V Macedonica, was founded in 43 BC and was still a fighting unit in Egypt in the 7th century AD when the region fell to Islamic armies.
Over 600 years. It's almost unbelievable.
So what's the final takeaway here?
I think the central insight is that the legion's success wasn't just about fighting prowess. It was built on meticulous, almost modern administration. By creating roles for specialists like the immunes, and by having a sophisticated financial system run by the signifer, they made sure the bureaucratic and logistical support was always there. It was prioritized, it was paid for.
So the whole structure, with its clear career path where you could literally rise from the ranks to the equestrian class, really does feel like a corporation.
It's an incredibly efficient, militarized corporation. It provided stability and a chance at social mobility in exchange for total obedience. And its organizational template, its DNA, would influence military and government structures for the next 2,000 years.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought.
It does. If the Roman legion was a corporation, what product were they selling? Conquest is the obvious answer. But I think it was something more fundamental. They were selling standardized, repeatable, and scalable security. And based on how long they were in business, they had the most effective business model in the ancient world.
A corporate model that literally drew the map of Europe. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the magnificent machine that was the Roman legion. We'll see you next time.